Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. I'm very glad that you're joining me to talk about street photography today. And I'm very excited about this, and also a huge thanks to BenQ for making this possible and for inviting me to host this webinar. It's actually the first webinar ever that I'm hosting, so I'm really excited about this, and I hope that it will be interesting for you and useful, that you will get some useful tips, information about how to shoot on the streets and how to do nice, spontaneous portraits of people on the streets. So to begin with, just let me show my website. So this is how it looks like. I will just try to introduce myself very quickly. So my name is Joanna Lemańska, and I'm a self-taught photographer based in Paris. My adventure with photography began around 10 years ago when I started to take photos of architecture in Paris, at first with a small compact camera, so nothing too serious at the very beginning. And then it all coincided with the beginning of Instagram, as well as me getting my first iPhone 4S, which soon became my favorite tool to take photos. So both smartphone and the rise of the social media, which boosted all activities related to photography in an incredible way, actually made it possible for me to break my way through as a professional photographer. Right now, I'm probably mostly known on Instagram for my travel and street photography. And since few years only, capturing moments of urban life are definitely in the center of my interests. And street photography is going to be the subject of today's webinar. So let's start it. During this webinar, we are going to focus on four main topics. So here they are. First, what is street photography? Then how to approach people, the importance of camera settings, and we are going to finish with editing and some useful, hopefully, advice about how to edit street photography shots. So what is street photography? Well, to be honest, I think that there might not just be one simple definition of street photography. For some, it will be strictly limited to photographing people and scenes of city life, while others will consider architecture and animated objects an important part of street photography too. In any case, a sense of observation and ability to capture a decisive moment seem to be the keys to street photography, or at least to its basics. As far as people and human behavior remain the subjects, street photography can get pretty close to photojournalism and documentary photography, although these two are definitely a separate genre in photography. For me, street photography is all about revealing the symbols and anecdotes hidden in everyday life, which generally go unnoticed. And I think it's the photographer's job to make them visible and to show them to other people by photographing them. All these does not necessarily involve any people in the frame, as human presence can be barely suggested by other elements. It can also put a highlight on traces left by people that say something about life, like on this picture, for example, where there's no one, no person within the frame, only a postcard, a pigeon, and some piece of architecture in the background. Anyway, during this webinar, we are going to focus on photography that puts people and their actions in the center. So let's start with different techniques of approaching people, as it's pretty hard to do street photography if you are anxious about people's reaction. Try to work on it as often as possible by going out and getting used to photograph people at the beginning from the distance and always trying to get a bit closer. To be honest, some days you won't accomplish anything, but the practice itself is extremely important. So don't get discouraged or afraid, and always try to start over again. I would advise to not wait for inspiration. A photographer just has to show up and get to work. And honestly, the best ideas come out of the process. They come out of the work itself. If you stay active and go out a lot, there is always something that will occur to you. If you're anxious about people seeing you taking photos of them, which is totally natural, even me after so many years, I sometimes I do not manage to take a photo of a person that I would like to shoot because I just get anxious. Well, so if it's your case as well, you might like to try different ways of holding on camera, for example. That will make the whole process less visible. If you try to hold it at a chest level or even lower, and remember that you don't always need to bring it up to your eyes. At the beginning, there might be quite a lot of issues with the framing, but the more you will practice, the better you will actually feel the camera, and the framing will improve too. Looking for a subject is an important part of the whole process. Face, clothes, silhouette, colors. It can even be a hat or a mustache or a bike. Like, I hope these pictures that you're seeing right now are showing such examples. Well, anything that stands out to you might be a good starting point. So just try to pay more attention to the people around you, the way they walk, the way they dress, how they are. And whenever you see something interesting, it can be potentially a good subject. So now let me show you some specific ways of approaching your subjects, starting with waiting. So waiting is actually one of the oldest tricks in the book. Whenever you stumble upon something that seems interesting to you, all you have to do is to stop and wait until someone enters the composition to make it complete. By something interesting, I mean an unusual background, elements of architecture, or a beautiful light, like in this series of photos, for example. So these are photos that I took 2 or 3 years ago on the banks of the Seine River. I was just walking down the pavement and I saw this beautiful light and mist. And I told myself that would be a really nice picture if there was only someone interesting entering the frame or something interesting happening with it. So I just stopped and waited and waited and waited. And then after maybe like 10 or 15 minutes, there was this little girl who entered the frame and really started to enjoy herself, to enjoy the beautiful light, the refreshing mist. And at this moment, all I was thinking about is to take as many pictures of her, beautiful pose, lovely dress, to take as many pictures of all of this, to have the choice afterwards and to see how it works. Because the combination of patience and luck is really at the heart of street photography. And sometimes you will get your shot, while sometimes it's just not meant to happen and you have to move on. In many cases, it is possible to return to the same place and to try again. The advantage of this technique is that it makes possible for you to get prepared in advance as well, and just to wait for the right occasion to occur. Well, in this case, obviously, the right occasion arrived, and so I did manage to get the photo that I wanted, and so this is how it looked at the end after cropping and after the edit as well. So this is the final picture from this little shooting. The waiting technique can also be reversed. So imagine you're walking down the street and suddenly there is someone emerging close by and they are looking interesting or maybe carrying something unusual. In this case, it will be totally natural to just follow them And this is the second technique. The difference with this approach is that as a photographer, you will also be moving. Everything will get quicker, and it is possible that you will have to run to get in the right position. Being ready and having camera settings done correctly are crucial here, and we will talk about them a little bit later. Here's an example of this approach. So pretty much the same situation as with the previous series. So I was walking down the street and I saw this guy wearing a really nice coat and a hat. So I thought that maybe it would be interesting to have a picture of him with this nice surroundings, a typical French cafe, beautiful conciergerie building in the background. So I started to follow him. While taking photos of him, I figure out, and this is another useful tip or rule maybe. So I figure out that, well, it's quite simple. I switch to portraits because people are vertical, and whenever you want to focus on a person, a vertical framing will probably just work better for it. This technique, this following technique, is also great when you're beginning with street photography, as it is much simpler to photograph someone from behind. So just take advantage of it. When following a person, the goal is to take a photo of your character with an interesting background. It can be nice lighting or anything that will make the picture look complete. Depending on circumstances, I will usually follow people for no more than a few minutes, as it's not really realistic to do it much longer, unless you want to get noticed by them and make the whole situation a bit awkward. Besides, it's not really possible to force something to happen, and so sometimes it is just better to let go and continue your own way and try to hunt another occasion. So this is again how the final picture looked like. So you could have seen that one on one of the previous ones. This one is already edited, so this is how it looked at the end. Another great method is using different layers while photographing. Natural street filters can be found literally everywhere. Search for glass, especially the one that is either wet or dirty or frosted. A layer can be made by a fog, a mist, a smoke, literally almost anything. All these, they can envelope a subject and enhance it. However, glass is for sure the most common layer, and it's usually some kind of a window. It's very easy to find, so I really advise any beginner of street photography to try and find some windows with nice reflection. Such filter will add texture and mood to your photograph. Let's have a look at this series of photos, for example. So here, basically, this little series is actually a mix of weighting technique and using layers. As you can see on the first photo, at first I just tried to find a nice place, nice point of view actually, and kind of position myself and think what I could do to make a nice picture. So on the second one, as you can see, I was trying to see how the converging lines on the ground are working. Is the perspective nice and how it all looks like? And then luckily, there was this person with umbrella entering the frame. So I took a couple of pictures of that person, telling myself, that's already a really nice picture, but still, I told myself, let's wait a little bit longer and see what will happen next. And after, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 minutes, there was literally a group of people emerging out of nowhere, everyone with umbrella, and that was really the perfect shot, the perfect situation that I was really waiting for. And actually, this one of those pictures in the bottom line was the final one that I choose to edit, and this is how it looks like after editing, when it's like kind of ready. It is also worth mentioning that taking photos from behind such layers, for example, may allow you to remain unseen and more at ease when you're taking photos of people. Lastly, you can also try to focus on both the layer and the subject beyond it. Those two alternatives will give two totally different results, and both are really worth trying. As you can see on those two pictures, the first one showing the lady at a bus stop, the focus is put on the lady and, well, the reflection at the same time, as they were pretty much close one to another. While on the second picture, the focus is definitely put on the raindrops. I just kind of told myself that the raindrops texture was really nice and good looking, while the colors behind, they can stay blurry like that. It's perfectly fine. And also the silhouette of a person passing by, it's just sharp enough to make it possible to distinguish the silhouette of a person. So here the idea was to put focus on the raindrops and let the texture play out the whole composition and the whole mood on this photo. Another important and very useful method of shooting street photography is using shadows. They are an extremely important part of street photography. They can be passive, but they can be the reason of the photograph as well. They can create patterns, atmosphere, and surprise, and therefore are definitely worth being chased for. It can actually even happen that a shadow is better than a thing or a person that casts it. In such cases, whenever it happens, you might consider turning the photograph upside down and just see how it looks like. You can look for sharp black shadows during a bright sunny day, like in the case of this photo that was taken basically in the middle of the day, and the sharpness and the darkness of those shadows give really very graphic and nice aspect to the whole image. You can also try to hunt for long golden shadows that are long shadows during afternoon light, for example, that really look also very nice. So this is completely different type of photos. Mild autumn evenings that we are having right now seem to be perfect for this kind of shooting, when you can just see how people and objects are being changed and distorted by shadows. As you may have noticed, the important thing about shadows is that they work perfectly in black and white because they have no color in them. So black and white usually works really, really well with shadows, and they can make a photograph look even more dramatic. Given that they often distort what people or objects look like, it also adds to a photograph's dramatic mood. Take these two photos as an example of such distortion. So both of them, the first one, the tree is really distorted, looking dramatic. The second one, pretty much the same. Actually, this one is showing my own shadow on the photo. It was kind of taken accidentally, but also the shape of my hat, of my face, are really sharpened and distorted by the shadow, adding this dramatic touch to the whole picture. Another very, very useful thing, and kind of my favorite ones, I guess, are reflections. They work pretty much like shadows with photography, and they too are rather a common concept in photography. However, the ways of using them are practically endless, and the results depend largely not on the technique itself, but rather on what is reflected and how. One can be easily surprised how original and beautiful they can be, and really any glossy surface can be used for this type of photographs. It can be windows or liquids such as water, any kind of reflective metal surfaces. Let's have a look at those examples of different reflections, all of them taken during a rainy day. Actually, they were all taken using a simple paddle. So two of them are mirror-like. The details reflected in the water are surprisingly sharp. The only difference between those two, the horizontal one and the upper one with the guy coming from under the bridge. So the only difference is the composition, and one of them just being composed of two equal halves. The third reflection, however, is dominated by fallen leaves, giving the whole image a painterly look. And only at a closer look you can distinguish buildings and two people. In all three cases, I think that this effect given by reflection really adds something special to the photo. And just try to imagine those very same photos taken without a reflection. So let's say, for example, just this guy coming from under the bridge with a nice building behind, or a couple walking in a park but without this painterly look given by the reflection. Well, I think it wouldn't be so interesting, or not interesting at all, actually. So here the reflection is really like the most important effect. Interesting thing about reflections of people is that they will appear the wrong way up when you see them at first. And so also they may appear kind of uninteresting or even ugly, like those three pictures. However, as soon as you turn them upside down, the image starts to make sense. Just look at this. For me, it looks totally different when it's upside down. And that's it. So in this case, it's kind of similar as with shadows, actually, again. So in this reflection, there's basically no color. So once again, I decided to put the final photo of this series in black and white. And so this is how it looks with the final edit. So now that you know a little bit about some techniques for approaching people and looking for a good subject, let's get to some tips about how to avoid boring photos. I don't know what you think about this, but to be honest, I think that the internet is literally filled with boring street photography. And there is a lot that can be done to avoid this problem. So first of all, always try to incorporate life and action whenever it's possible, as usually plain photos of buildings like these, for example, well, they will usually appear quite boring, as there is nothing interesting going on. Those two pictures are examples that I found in my archive. So this is, I have lots of pictures that are not being used because I don't think they are good or interesting. But so this is the type of image that there's really nothing interesting. And then the architecture is nice, especially on the first photo, but there's nothing happening. There is no life. So I think that is what should be avoided when you're trying to do nice, meaningful street photography. Nothing interesting within the frame is probably the most common mistake, and taking random photos of a street or of a group of people most likely won't have anything interesting in them, like those three examples when there are people and there is life and there is maybe nice urban environment, but there is absolutely nothing interesting in those photos. No one is looking in a particular way, no expressions, no feelings transferred by these images. So this is definitely something that should be avoided. Another example, so just a random group of people passing by. It's also a little bit blurry. I didn't even I didn't even edit this picture. They are really not even worthy to try any editing. So basically, the first step to avoid taking such pictures is to always look for something interesting before you snap, before you take your photo. Another very important tip for me, because I see lots of pictures like this on the internet, is that some subjects it is actually better to avoid. Try to avoid the easy lure of photographing homeless people or street performers. They might seem to be good subjects because they usually stay in one place and they don't seem to mind being photographed, but in reality, they rarely make good photos. Besides, if you take photos of them, they will look just like thousands of similar photos of the same subject that is being photographed every day by every tourist that passes by. And honestly, in this case, similar means boring. Of course, it is possible to approach those subjects in a different way and to take photos of homeless people or street performers in a great way. I knew myself some photographers who did really an excellent job photographing those subjects, but it's just another level. And for beginning with street photography, it's really not a good idea to start with such subjects. Unfortunately, I didn't manage to find any good examples of this kind of photos in my archives. I guess I was really avoiding this so much that I couldn't find anything. Another problem that I see quite often, and that I'm kind of quite often struggling with it, is being too far from your subject. Well, being too far from the subject will result in a boring photo too. When you're far away, like in this picture, for example, the viewer will not be able to feel like he's a part of the photo, and it won't be interesting to look at such an image. For example, this one that I took a few months ago in Paris before the lockdown, I guess it could have been interesting if I had managed to get closer to that waiter during his cigarette pause. If I managed to get closer to him, take a photo from a shorter distance, maybe capture his facial expression or look. Well, unfortunately, I didn't manage. I was way too far. Maybe I got nervous as well because I didn't want to get seen by him while shooting. Anyway, this is not a good picture at all for all those reasons. And usually, of course, it happens that I will take photos like that, but then I just know that there is no possible way for me to use them for anything. Well, I guess it will be almost the last tip. Well, it's about finding an interesting subject. Well, let's be honest, street photos of people walking by billboards are boring, just as any photo of a person doing nothing special. I believe that everyone saw those images of a guy sitting on a bench, or people crossing the street, or a random girl looking at her smartphone. If there is nothing special about a person you photograph, the final result will most probably turn out boring. So make sure that your subject has something interesting about them. And well, those photos, again, they show really boring situations, nothing special about those subjects. So let's do a little resume, as I think that might be kind of useful for you. So incorporate life and action, nothing interesting within the frame should be avoided, as well as photographing homeless people and street performers. Try to not be too far from your subject, even if it happens, just try again. Then finding an interesting subject is really crucial here. And then I added trying different angles and perspectives, but this is kind of covered with the previous methods using layers, shadows, and reflections. So this is what I would call trying different angles and perspective. So when you find your subject, a scene and a perspective, you might realize that probably the biggest challenge when taking photos on the streets is to avoid non-voluntary blurry pictures. In particular, it is particularly difficult to achieve, especially when you have very little or zero time to adjust your camera settings when you're literally running after your subject or shooting a very dynamic scene. To avoid such involuntarily blurry pictures, there are only a few rules for me to be respected. So first of all, high shutter speed will always minimize the risk of blurry pictures, and it will let you play with aperture to choose the depth of field that you would like to have. If it's possible, it depends on cameras, but usually using mine, I will try to not put my ISO higher than 800. So it helps me to avoid the noise and grainy pictures. That is usually something that I don't really like on my photos. Anyway, personally, for me, the biggest challenge for me always that I'm really struggling with is focus. I mostly shoot with autofocus as it is the easiest and fastest way to get my picture. However, it happens that it's not done correctly and the focus just put itself behind the main subject. It happens to me during every spontaneous shooting on the street. Also, in some specific conditions like photographing layers, autofocus just won't work, or it will not work very well. In those cases, you shouldn't hesitate to switch to manual focus. Some cameras and most lenses allow to set the focus distance. So, for example, you can select 1.5 meters, 2 meters, 2.5, and so on. And so it means that every subject within the selected distance will be clear. It's a great solution, a really life-changing solution for street photography, where being fast can be crucial. As soon as you get a little bit familiar with distances, you can become much quicker while shooting and just not worry about the focus at all, as it will always be clear within the chosen distance. In any case, it is extremely important to get a good grip of your camera and to simply know your gear and what you can do with it. If you really understand aperture, shutter speed, ISO, you can't really go wrong. Correct settings will avoid you lots of work during post-productions because it is needless to say that some mistakes as regards settings are not possible to amend during the post-production. If a photo is blurry, no amount of editing will ever make it look sharp. So in any case, once you have your shot, you will most probably need to edit it a little bit. So then two options are possible and you have to choose between different editing tools. So basically it comes down to choosing between computer and a smartphone. Now, editing on a smartphone has lots of advantages. It's fast, intuitive, you can do it almost everywhere. And there are lots of editing apps that are really well done and that allow doing a professional post-production. However, here we are going to focus on editing on a computer, which remains more precise and thoughtful than working on a small screen, and often in conditions that don't allow concentration. This is actually why I gradually stopped editing on my phone, and now I hardly ever do it. While working on your photos, you should be able to see every detail and make sure the colors you're seeing are the real ones. So most new laptops already have high definition screens by default, and that's great and totally sufficient to edit correctly. However, as a desktop user, I believe that it's really better to get a high definition screen and add it on to your current build. I had a chance to test the latest 27 inches BenQ SW270C photographer's monitor, and it only reassured me that it's probably the most efficient and satisfying way to work, especially when a display's colors accuracy is the most important feature, and for me it definitely is. So some may think that all this is only important for print photographers. That is not true. Editing your colors on such high quality monitors means they will appear in the right range to anyone who looks at your photograph. BenQ's photographer's monitor improves RGB color blending and accuracy, resulting in perfect color and gray tone reproduction. That is super important when editing street shots, because simply there are lots of grays and very similar tones that are close to each other. So it's really a great tool. So now let's get to the edit itself. So let me switch to the Lightroom, because as for the editing, I never use any Photoshop. It's only Lightroom edit for me. And to be honest, there are only a few rules that I apply while working on my photos, and all of them can be resumed to only one, which is too much edit can kill the photo, and it probably will. And especially in street photography, I think you have to be very careful not to lose some of the authenticity of the photo. It's like the edit is not there to replace the photograph or to add to it some meaning that might not be there. I think the goal here is to put a highlight on the best parts of the image. So let's take some examples like this picture. The key, I think, to successful edit is to find out first what should be improved and why. So, for example, this image, it seems quite obvious to me. It's simply too dark. We can hardly see the lady's face. So the edit, I think, is quite simple here. I will use the most basic option, so just make it much more bright, like this, for example. And then when I do it, let's put some shadows as well. I mean, let's clarify some shadows. It looks already better, but now the problem, I think, is that the lady's face is not very well visible right now, and there's also a little bit too many reds. So what I do is I select just this tiny part that I would like to improve. Oops, I will just try to see why. Oops, sorry. Okay, so let's get back to it. So I will just try, for example, in this case, to improve a little bit the brightness of the lady's face, just a tiny little bit, to keep it as natural as possible, and also to make the saturation a little less strong so that her face is not so red. Why it's not working? Yeah, maybe like this. So I think it already looks a little better. Now what I like to do next is to reinforce the reds behind her, because the color here is really nice. So I will go to the color management panel, choose reds, and try to see how it looks like when I put on more saturation. And I think it looks really nice. The luminosity, as you can see, can be also interesting to put it a little more. But then I will just adjust a little more the colors in the face of the lady. And to be honest, when you compare this already a little bit edited photo with the original, it looks pretty different. The edited one is much better. Obviously, you can see clearly the person's face, so it's already not bad at all. Now, the only thing, for example, that I would like to improve is maybe the color of her hat. That was really blue, but on the photo it looks kind of grayish. So what I will try to do here will be to switch to the blues and see if I can make it a little more blue, actually. And so putting on some saturation again and luminosity as well. And I think that it already looks a little bit better. If you compare with the original picture, it definitely is more blue. So basically, all edits that I do can be resumed to this kind of processing. And I really try to keep it as natural as possible. So this one was kind of easy. Let's try another picture with another edit that seems a little bit more complicated to me. So this is the one. Well, first of all, let's put it upright. It's automatic, so it's kind of easy to do. Then it needs to be cropped a little bit because it cannot stay like that with white margins. So just a little bit like this. I always try to avoid cropping too much, but sometimes it's just not possible to avoid, like in the case of this this photo. So here, basically, what's interesting and nice in this picture is the guy with the umbrella crossing the street and nice green and red lights reflecting on the pavement. So the main problem of this picture is, again, it's too dark. So I can already put on more brightness, like this, for example. But then what looks pretty bad, I think, is that the whole image is really gray, and it doesn't really enhance the look of those greens and reds that are being reflected on the pavement. So here, for example, when I try to identify what should be improved in the picture, it's definitely all those gray tones. I would like to change them and make them look more blue, for example. This is quite easy to do because in every gray tones in the picture, there's always some blues in it. So usually it's totally enough to switch to the color control panel in Lightroom to select blue or turquoise, and then just play with those three controls and see how it changes. So I think this is already, when it approaches green tones, it's getting a little bit less gray than at the beginning. Let's put on some more saturation, like this. Luminosity, I'm not sure about this, but I'm just checking and playing with it and seeing how the image is changing so that I can choose the look that I'm looking for. But it's actually much better like this. I hope that, oh, maybe a little bit too much. I hope that you can see that all this grayness has basically disappeared. So it actually adds to a nice mood of this picture. I basically don't want my photos to look gray, sad, or anything like that, but it still looks pretty much natural. And then when the tones of the picture are basically done, for me it looks much better than before. All I'd like to do would be to make this lower part of the picture a little bit brighter, so we can see more we can see more clearly the legs and the silhouette of the person and the step that he's doing. So once again, I just select this part of the picture with this tool, and I will try to brighten it up a little bit like this. Again, not too much, because let's not make it look unnatural. Honestly, in basically all of my pictures, I only do such small adjustments as regards luminosity, color, saturation, contrast. I hardly ever do any other what someone might call more serious edit. But for me, this is the goal with street photography, to keep it as natural as possible and to not over edit the picture, because it can just very quickly, it can become quite ugly. So that would be all for this photo. So let's just check now how it looked before, so we can compare. So as you can see, well, the previous one is not upright, so it's maybe more difficult to compare, but as you can see, I think I quite managed to get rid of those gray tones that I really disliked on this photo. And with blue tones, it looks really nicer, and this is how it should look like. Well, I'd be very happy to show you another edit, but I think that we are approaching already 1 hour. So I will be happy to get to know right now what questions you might have about this webinar or about what we were talking about. So really looking forward to your questions. Okay, so there are some. Well, let's start with question from Joanna. Hi, Joanna. So Joanna is asking, do you usually shoot in JPG or RAW? In JPG, well, many will say that it's not correct, or it's bad even, but actually when I'm taking photos for myself and I'm not on a commission, I will use JPEG, because it takes less space. It allows me to do all edit that I want to do, and it's just easier to edit. It takes less time for the computer to process it, and so on and so on. However, whenever I'm working for a brand, whenever I'm commissioned to the shooting, then no joking around, and I will shoot in RAW, because I want to be sure that I will have the best quality possible for my client, and in those cases I will shoot in RAW. Let's see another questions. Darian is asking, do you always use presets to edit your pictures? To be honest, yes, almost always. So right now, when I was editing and showing you how I do it on Lightroom, I didn't use them because it maybe wouldn't be so interesting for you to see me just applying the edit that is already done. But I actually do that, and I will just show you very quickly how it can look like. So for example, this very same photo, let's get back to the beginning. So it looked like, it looked like this. And I have here in Lightroom a few presets that I did myself, actually. They are over here. And usually I will use one of those to edit a photo. like this one, for example, those two presets work pretty well. So I would choose, for example, one of those, and then I will see if I want to edit more the picture or if I'm already fine with that. I like, there are only a few presets, but I really like them. Usually they will already do some basic editing job for me and make it all a little bit faster. A question from Alan. Do you always take photos by yourself or do you go out in a group? Well, Alan, actually, I do both. I actually do both. So I have a bunch of friends, photographers' friends, and sometimes we'll go on a shoot together. Together, I mean, like we'll be no more than 3 people all together, actually. They are people that I know very well. We are very comfortable with each other. And I know that whenever I walk with them, whenever I interrupt conversation and just go somewhere to take a photo, they will not really feel offense about this, or it's like they will not care about this, and I have a lot of liberty to take photos and just get myself further from them and follow a subject. They will do the same thing on their side. So whenever they feel like they need or they want to take a photo, they would just do it, and we like feel very comfortable with each other. And also sometimes taking photos with those friends, it's also kind of stimulating. Sometimes they will tell me, look, Joanna, there's something interesting going on, something that maybe I would not have noticed if I was there by myself. So it's definitely a very cool way of taking photos to have such a small group of people to do it. Otherwise, I do it all by myself as well. I would say it's like 50-50. And it's also very, it can be more productive actually when I take photos all by myself. It's very different when I'm all by myself. It's like a lonely hunter in the city. I like both ways of taking photos. So as far as I am concerned, and as long as my friends want to hang out with me and shoot with me, it's great. So let's see, there is a question from Charlotte. Have you been called out by your subjects before? How have you diffused conflicts? Well, that's a very cool question. Yes, I have been already called out or noticed by my subjects. However, it hardly ever happened that actually a person that I was shooting came up to me to ask me a question or to ask me to show him or her the picture. Whenever it happened, actually, it was in a very nice way. So usually a person was coming to see me and kind of joking and asking me, wow, you have been taking photos of me, can I see it? And so I'm always showing the picture, and usually the person was kind of, wow, this picture is so nice, thank you, and really never any problem at all, except one situation where there was actually a conflict, and I would like to show you the photo that started the whole conflict. It was actually the part of the presentation. So this is the photo. And the funny thing is that, as you can see, there is no one on this picture. But in reality, on the right side of the pavement, right side of the photo, very far away from me, there was a bookseller. And he was convinced that I was taking pictures of him, while actually I was not at all. I was totally focused on pigeons flying and landing near those postcards. So he was sure that I was taking photos of him, and actually he was kind of rude. I tried to explain that I was not photographing him at all. I wanted to show him my picture to just make him realize that I was only taking photos of the pigeons, but he wouldn't hear anything. And to be honest, it was the only really ugly situation that I got into. And actually, I don't know how I was going to diffuse conflict, while actually it was escalating quite quickly. And the guy was literally menacing me with breaking my gear and my camera. It was horrible. And also I was not even taking photos of him, actually. So next one, question from Hattis. I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing correctly your name. What is your approach to taking photography in a new environment and city? Do you make research for your photography before you visit the city? Definitely yes. So if I'm in a new city, in a new place for myself, like a personal trip, I will not do a lot of research. I will just enjoy my time. I will walk a lot around the city and just enjoy the whole process. However, it is totally different whenever I had to shoot for a client and I'm on a commission. So as soon as it's getting serious and I know that I will have to deliver lots of pictures to my client, then I definitely do a huge research on social media, on Instagram, on Pinterest. I look at all possible pictures on Google Street View. So basically, I put on Google Street View and I literally make virtual walks on Google Street View to have an idea about how a city looks like and make it easier for me when I'm there. So of course, it can be a little bit stressful. And yes, I definitely do a research before I visit a city for a commission. A cool question from Ian. Do you shoot on a street with just one lens, or do you take several lenses in your backpack? Well, it depends actually on my mood. Sometimes I feel like I want to go to the city and very light, so I will not take much equipment, only one lens or no lenses at all, actually, because I have also a very good small compact camera that is great for street photography. It's very light, fast, and great performance. So sometimes it's just like that. Other days, I will take my bigger camera, Fujifilm, with 2 or 3 lenses, and I will put all of them in my backpack, and I will be like interchanging them during my walk through the city, depending on situations, people, and so on. So it all depends. It's both, actually. Question from Tanya. Do you ever speak to your subjects or ask if they mind? Well, no, never actually. I avoid all kinds of interaction for a few reasons. So first of all, I'm kind of shy, so I wouldn't feel very comfortable asking for permission or asking someone to do something for me to get a nice picture. So whenever I talk to my subjects, as said before, it's the subject that approach me and ask me questions. Whenever it happens, I will be very happy and interested to talk with the person. I like it. I'm just not the person who initiates it. And above all, I don't want to look my pictures like they are staged or like the person posed for a photo. So this is another main reason for not asking any permission, because as soon as you ask anything or you talk to the person, all the spontaneous vibe will disappear. Many people will start to pose and it will not be the same again. There were like a few examples of such pictures, like those ones that I didn't take quite much time to show them to you. So I cannot imagine taking those 2 photos, for example, that way if I had asked the nuns or those 2 ladies if I could take pictures of them. The expressions would not be so natural, so nice. It just wouldn't be the same. Same goes for this beautiful smiling lady. She's so natural, beautiful face, very stylish. It couldn't be the same if I had asked for permission. This smile wouldn't be the same. So I don't do that. I don't think it would work for the kind of photography that I'm doing. The question from Ulrike is kind of cool. What is your favorite lens? I have a favorite one, but also I have the one that I use the most, and they are not the same actually. So my favorite lens is 56 millimeters lens that its aperture goes down to 1.2. So you can, it's very high aperture opening, so it's very bright. I love this lens, and it helps a lot with photography, and especially street portraits. However, the lens that I use the most is a 23 millimeters. It's the most polyvalent lens, I think, so I definitely use it the most. And I think there are maybe not more questions for now. So let's end here, guys. Thank you so much for your time and for joining me for this first webinar in my life. I hope you like it. I hope that you enjoyed the tips and everything. I believe that there are maybe some more questions that I will not be able to answer right now, but should you have any more questions, you can always drop me a line on Instagram or through my website or by email. I will be very happy to answer any photography related questions, so do not hesitate. I love to have your feedback as well about this webinar, so you can tell me if it was good or if something was missing or if I didn't talk enough. So do not hesitate to ask anything you like about photography. Thank you again, BenQ, for having me for this webinar. It was really cool. I loved preparing this. It's really a little joy that I have during this hard times and lockdown and everything. So thanks again, everyone, and goodbye, and hope to do it again someday. Goodbye.